I'm going to cut across, though, to a reaction from the Indian-Canadian National Alliance Chief, Azad Kaushik. Here's what he had to say.
Dr. Kaushik, first of all, we've just gotten a news alert right now that Indian visa services have been suspended until further notice. How hard is it currently for Indian nationals, for Indians residing in Canada, sir?
Well, that's a very unfortunate news. We would not like to see it this way. We have always stood for very good Canada-India relations, and this is what we have been doing for decades to enhance the level of relationship between Canada and India through business, trade, cultural visits, education, and all these areas. So this is very upsetting to Indo-Canadian community. We would very much like to see Canada-India relations back to where they were, and these visa services are restored. The Indo-Canadian community is very concerned about recent turn of events, and there is not one, there are several of those. Our Prime Minister has made a statement in the Parliament that is a matter concerning between two governments. That's entirely an intergovernmental matter, but Indo-Canadian community is very upset to see these relations nosedive all of a sudden with this kind of revelation. And the community looks forward to getting some evidence and treat it as per rule of law of the land. We are waiting and watching all of a sudden what has happened that has shocked all of us. Somebody could make such hostile statements to ask people to leave. They have no business to make such a kind of statement about Canadians. So that's a challenge, and we are quite concerned about that. We have raised that matter with our Public Safety Minister, and we expect that all Indo-Canadians feel safe and they're very well protected.
All right. Well, we hear that. Of course, it's going to be a troublesome or a point of trouble for many, many Indians and Canadians alike wanting to come into India. Let me cut across to Gaurav Sawant, who joins us for more on that. Gaurav, traditional allies, friends at one point. The equations between India and Canada has now turned so sour. Never have we seen this kind of strained relationship between the two nations. And it all sparked off with Justin Trudeau's one comment, which largely is unfounded. He may have signals that indicate whatever it does, but without concrete evidence. Speaking about India's involvement in killing of Khalistani leader Nijjar is certainly going to be troubling, and India is undoubtedly going to be reacting, and this is a response. Even though the Indian government has not clearly stated what's the reason for suspending services, one can only imagine that this is the reason.
Nabila, if I may, not only did Canada make completely baseless and unfounded allegations, they also sent back the officer who was supposed to ensure that the visa process and security functions smoothly. That officer of the Indian mission in Canada was ordered by the government of Canada to go back. Now, until there's a new officer who can go there, until a system can be put in place again, visas cannot arbitrarily and be given to people who want to come to India, especially when there are voices in Canada that threaten Indian lives, that threaten Hindus, that you go back to your country. It's a very dangerous situation in Canada, and these things cannot be taken lightly. Nabila, we have suffered in our own country when mosque loudspeakers were used to tell Hindus to get out of Jammu and Kashmir. So any threat that is made telling people to go back can never be taken lightly, whether it was made in Kashmir in 1990 or it's being made in Canada in 2023. It can have massive consequences. Do keep in mind, India had sensitized Canada about Khalistani terrorists trying to blow up a plane. Canada did not take it seriously, and Air India flight Air AI 182, they put a bomb, the Khalistanis put a bomb on it, and 320 plus people died. 286 of whom were people from Canada. 20 were pregnant women who were killed in the Kanishk bombing. So any threat that's issued in Canada can never be taken lightly, and that is why visas have been suspended till systems can be put in place once again.
It's unfortunate that the Canadian government does not see through it, the threat that the Khalistani movement brings. At least for long, what they've stood for is a separate country, and India is never going to be okay with that. Any country that protects or is concerned of its own sovereignty will respect India's sovereignty. Clearly, Canada isn't. At this point, visas have been suspended. Gaurav, would you be able to tell us if the Indian government has given out an official statement on this? Are we reading into this visa suspension the right way?
Well, visas have been suspended because there is a due process that needs to be followed when a visa is given to a person of another country to come to your country, and verification and security verification is a very important aspect of that. You want to know who are the people who are coming into your country, and if Canada sends back the officer who's supposed to do that job, then until somebody else is able to do that job, India's security cannot be vulnerable to Justin Trudeau's whims and fancies. So that's exactly why this process has been put on hold. Whether there would be an escalation in times to come, whether retaliatory measures would be taken, all of that needs to be watched. But none of this, do keep in mind, none of this is an arbitrary step that is being taken. Every step, at least from the Indian side, is very well thought out. That's what my sources are telling me. Every step is very well thought out to ensure Indian lives are safe. The advisory that was issued yesterday, each word was very carefully chosen, including the Canadian government condoned violence that's happening in Canada, the threats that are happening in Canada, and the steps that are being taken now.
You know, Gaurav, you spoke about the advisory that India has given out to Canada, and that very clearly speaks of hate crimes, and particularly warns Indian students there not to venture into areas where there could be a Khalistani gathering. So this is a huge message that India has sent out to Indians in Canada. Of course, they are the ones at the receiving end now.
The situation is very precarious. The situation is very tense. It cannot be taken lightly. And this is happening despite India's repeated warnings to Canada. Look at the way gang wars are escalating in Canada. Look at the way Khalistani terrorists and Khalistani terror supporters are now virtually on a killing spree. And instead of taking action against the perpetrators, the blame is being laid at India's door without any evidence being put in public domain. Now, any evidence also has to stand scrutiny in a court of law in any civilized country. At least that's the way one functions, unless of course it's like the United States of America that kills Osama bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri, and that is seen as war on terror. So again, there are rules to be followed, and this is where India is very systematically moving forward. If you send back the minister counselor in charge of security, of visas, of consular service, if that officer is sent back, then systems need to be put in place.
Right, Gaurav, thank you very much for joining us.